Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, with you at B2B World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the press conference by DG ISPR, with, of course, the reference against the war against terrorism that Pakistan has been waging for quite some time now, and, of course, the incident in Balochistan with the Jafar Express. And this is particularly important in terms of what has been spoken about as to who really is responsible for these attacks. And we have seen that the DG ISPR has clarified that India is the main sponsor behind these attacks, with, of course, links in Afghanistan. And this is important in terms of the linkages and the nexus that exists between India and Afghanistan as part of state-sponsored terrorism by India towards Pakistan. And then, of course, with the involvement of the Afghan Taliban regime in providing safe havens and also operational support to the terrorist organizations, including the TTP in Afghanistan. And, of course, in the ways that they have links to BLA and Waheed Brigade and to what can be done with regards to the on-ground situation. There is, of course, a lot of reference in terms of social media and fake accounts and the kind of false propaganda narrative being put forward by India, and also certain elements at home. And with reference to the war against terrorism, there is also, of course, conversations around what needs to be done and how we need to be careful and mindful of talking about these incidents in terms of intelligence failures, because they're, of course, not as such in terms of the ways in which we have seen the army and the forces respond to these terrorist incidents. And we have seen a very successful hostage rescue operation that was carried out and, of course, lauded by ISPR and, of course, other elements of the state as well. But in terms of what that means as a response for Pakistan, as to what it is that Pakistan will be doing in this regard, of course, remains to be seen, and we're going to be taking a closer look into that. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And we've also been joined online by Brigadier Raashid, Wali, Janjua, who's also joined us as Director Research IPRI. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And I'll start with you, Janjua Sab, in terms of your perspective first, as to the ways in which Pakistan has, of course, put forward the stance regarding the elements involving coming out from Pakistan in Afghanistan and also in India. The DG ISPR has clarified that the main sponsor behind the Jafar Express train attack is India, but we, of course, have evidence of the calls being made in Afghanistan as well. And so I want your take on this nexus that exists and how it is being dealt with in terms of what Pakistan can actually do in this regard. We have the evidence. We've always put forward the fact that there is involvement coming in from both these countries. But this, of course, attack is being spoken about as an act of war, and it's, of course, a very huge terrorist incident that took place most recently. So I want your take in terms of what this nexus is that has developed and how Pakistan will be able to tackle it.
Thanks, Anna. This nexus is very clear, and even at the cost of repetition, I would say, which I have been saying all along, that Balochistan is in the crosshair of global power contestation, and there are forces which are inimical to initiatives like China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. They would like to keep the pot boiling, and those are all abetting and actively supporting this BLA insurgency. Indian RAW has made no bones about their intent to support this insurgency, according to Ajit Doval doctrine. And their linkages are very clear. The way it was, the whole episode of Jafar Express hijacking was choreographed on the social media. It was as if somebody was, some puppeteer was holding the strings and giving directions for this drama. BLA were in touch with their handlers, and through satellite phone, there were linkages and intercepts which were found in Afghanistan. Now, it's a tragedy that on our borders we have destabilized Afghanistan with an Afghan interim government which is not in control of its own territory. And rather, now it appears that they are acting as proxies for Indian RAW, and they are actually establishing a linkage between ethno linguistic particularism of BLA and ideologically driven TTP. Unfortunately, that's the reality. There are safe sanctuaries for BLA in Afghanistan and even, unfortunately, in Iran. Now, that's a destabilized landscape in which this militancy is gaining ground, and it has been, on the rise incrementally, slowly. This was a major upscaling on part of BLA when they attacked a passenger train and made their intent known very well. I think this is crossing of the Rubicon, and the law enforcement agencies and the provincial administration, they got a wake-up call. Today, I think the presentation and briefing by Chief Minister Balochistan and DG ISPR made it very clear that now the rules of the game would be changed, and there would be two prongs to this strategy. One is the kinetic, and another is non-kinetic. In kinetic, I think the counter-terrorism operations would be upscaled using leveraging all technology like drones, choppers, intelligence-based operations, and the battle would be taken to their actual bases so that they are disrupted before they could organize and mount an attack. And an ecosystem of support and financial help that is rampant, that would be attacked. Then we would have to look at their secure bases in Afghanistan. And I believe all options are on card, how to deal with those things. And then the non-kinetic version. Today it was music to my ears once Chief Minister Balochistan very candidly acknowledged that it was the governance deficit in the past which had resulted in frustration of especially the young generations, which was leading to this discontent. And since people were not connected with the government in the past, that was giving a lot of help for the recruiters of BLA. And I was frankly amazed that in the past, the jobs were not being given on merit. In fact, the jobs were being sold for rupees 20 lakh, and the development was not properly executed. And because of corruption, the fruits of that development were not visible to the people. And the anger of those frustrated masses was very cleverly diverted by an elite, political elite towards the state. So all that is expected to change. And then there was a administrative and policing vacuum in those B areas. B areas constitute around 90% of Balochistan. Now, unfortunately, this is incongruity in this age, that the writ of the state, police, administrative system, and judiciary is not applicable to those areas where the Sardars and their private militias, which is the levies, which is paid incidentally by the government. 82 billion is their annual budget, out of which around 40% is being siphoned off cleanly and not given to these levies. And these levies act as personal personal militias of the tribal Sardars to enhance their clout. So under this climate, where there's administrative policing vacuum, the all responsibility comes to paramilitary organizations and army for maintaining security. And I think now the non-kinetic component of the civilian government needs would also be activated, and it would be a balanced strategy to tackle this menace. But we should acknowledge one thing, that despite all these efforts, since it is externally abetted, and the reason is that the global power contestation means that there would be certain forces which would keep on instigating this insurgency come what may. So we might see a low level insurgency at all times, but important thing is that its back needs to be broken. We have a template in front of us. In 2009 also, once this thing gained strength, there was a very dedicated team of intelligence agencies which put a stop to that thing, and their back was broken. I think a similar approach is needed now. We need to be very resolute, and when there is a brush fire, we first go reach and snuff out that brush fire, and then the other measures need to be taken, political engagement, assuagement of their genuine grievances, better governance, better administration, and policing. So all that is a heavy menu, but I think the time has come and the state has been given a rude jolt, and this is a wake up call, and all elements of national power now need to be uh, marshaled to concentrate all energies to snuff out this militancy.
Right, absolutely. And Faisal, your perspective with reference to what we have discussed earlier also in terms of the ways that Pakistan is going to be engaging with elements outside of the country as well. And there is, of course, the possibilities of whether or not any other players in the international community are actually also going to be involved in this fight. But in terms of the ways that we have seen that Pakistan, of course, has borne most of the brunt. I want your take on whether or not there can be other key regional or international players such as Russia or the US that can actually give tangible support to the equation.
Yeah, why not? Sana, obviously when we talk about, support extended to Pakistan to fight this menace, I think it would not be just a support to Pakistan, but of course they would be ultimately supporting themselves. Because if we talk about, ISIS Khorasan, TTP, BLA, BLF, all of these, outfits, the terrorist outfits, they are like this, and if they are like this and supporting each other, then eventually, of course, we know that all of the neighboring countries, including China and Russia and Central Asian republics as well, and even Iran to some extent, all of them, they have concerns related to them, because they are going to affect them eventually. And still, I mean, whenever there is any terrorist activity going on in Russia, in Central Asian republics, or elsewhere, then the footprints of that, of course, they reach back to Afghanistan. The situation is quite similar. Like once the footprints they used to get back to Afghanistan in shape of course, Al Qaeda was active at that time. Now it's ISIS itself, and ISIS Khorasan is playing a role. And overall, the umbrella is a sort of same jihadi umbrella that is under the guise of jihad. They are actively, of course, conducting the terrorist activities elsewhere, and that would reach out to the Western countries as well if it is not stopped here. So I believe countries that are most of the concerns, America itself, and then the Western countries as well, including UK and Russia being the regional country, and then Iran being the regional country. Of course, Pakistan is already fighting against them. So if all of these countries, they do come up with the assistance in terms of assisting Pakistan to fight this menace, in a way, they would not be helping out Pakistan, but help out themselves. And here I wanted to, of course, hail this joint presser by Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif Chaudhry and obviously Chief Minister of Balochistan, Sarfraz Bukti. He was very open and candid about whatever the actual problems are, and he was very right about it. I just wanted to add another aspect to it, and that was related to, in recent times we have been seeing that the young girls, they have been used by these BLA monsters, and them young girls, if they are not getting, of course, influenced by them in terms of under the slogan of liberation, then there is another mechanism which is being applied to them, and that is that many of them who are living in the Western countries, they are showing their pictures. I mean, I have literally seen many of the BLA activists living abroad in the Western countries, they using their very fancy pictures, wearing sunglasses and standing next to very lush posh cars. And what they do is they have these profiles and they get in touch with these girls, Baloch girls, who are of course educating themselves in the different universities of Pakistan, and they get through to them and they lure them in terms of a relationship on the social media or somewhere. And somehow, I mean, this is very saddening to even mention it, that they get their pictures, questionable pictures, and then after that they start blackmailing them, saying that these pictures they will be showing it to their families, their parents, and eventually they cash them, and they of course put them through the process of joining BLA, and then later on they are seen as, and they are being caught as, I mean, few of them, they got caught wearing the vests and of course being the suicide bombers, because to safeguard the honor of the family, what they do is they end up taking their own life and being the fuel of the BLA. And eventually, of course, BLA, I mean, I was going through whatever Brigadier Janjua has earlier said, and of course India's involvement, I mean, it needs to be highlighted more and more. Why I say this? Because
highlighted where?
Highlighted throughout the world. I mean, the dossiers would be given to United Nations, dossiers would be given to the European Union, and it needs to be.
Does that have an impact?
It will have an impact. Reason being, they are already echoing throughout the world about India being the exporter of the terrorism, and this would be another feather in the dirty cap of Indians. And to me, I think it is more important to do it right now, because when the whole world is talking, the Canadian Prime Minister had highlighted in the Parliament, and if the Americans are catching their beast, their rogue assassin wings actives that are active in the Western world, if they are already doing it, we should further make and form the dossiers and give them more as an evidence that this is how they are of course exporting terrorism throughout the world. Of course, to Pakistan and rest of the world, they are exporting the terrorism, and this export of terrorism is actually of course funding BLA, BLF and Majid Brigade, people like Majid Brigade. According to my source, I have been, 10 days ago I've been told that 25 million US dollars they have been provided to BLA and BLF through their own connections. How they did it, this is not, I being an individual, I can't probe it. Of course, the governments, they can probe it, and the intelligence agencies, they can probe it. We need to probe it, how the money channels are being used, how Afghanistan is playing a role, how other countries could be involved as well. I'm not saying that they are involved in literally sending money to BLA or BLF, right, but they must be involved in, of course, tunneling the money through to Afghanistan, and eventually right, from Afghanistan that money gets to BLA and BLF, and they do these kind of activities. I think we need to highlight it further, more and more. Reason being, even when we listen to the Indian media, of course they kept on charging on Pakistan, and they portrayed as if this is going to be a prolonged hijacking, and the people who are hijacked, of course there will be a media drama for like 5-6 days, and in 5-6 days the debate would be generated, and the eventual debate would be that like Afghan Taliban and US had the resolve in Doha Accord, there must be another Doha Accord by Pakistan military and these BLA and BLFs. They just wanted to portray it, and they wanted to tell the world that this is how the situation is in Balochistan and it needs to be sorted out.
Right.
That's how they wanted to play it. But salute to Pakistan security forces, salute to the Zarar company of SSG, who busted all of these monsters out there, all of these rats out there, and that's how it should be nibbed.
Right. And Farrukh, I want your take on this, because in terms of the ways that we actually look beyond Pakistan in terms of whether or not there can be regional international support is of course one way, even if it's not in terms of tangible action, but in terms of highlighting these issues or presenting dossiers or looking towards the United Nations or the international community in general as to how they're going to respond to these evidences that we've been giving for quite some time now. Is that a strategy that we can and should continue? And if not, then what other options do we have in terms of dealing with these elements emerging from India and Afghanistan?
Right, Sana, thank you very much earlier, because India and Indian media was actually mentioned, and I've been following Indian media, not only the conservative mainstream media but also the conservative, the liberal private media, YouTube and all. So God, it saddens me to actually share with you this anecdote from my own life. I remember, you will also remember, when COVID was at its peak, at that time there was an oxygen crisis in India. At that time what happened was that repeatedly we would hear, stories of people who were actually dying because of lack of oxygen. Usually those people did not have names that I recognized, and it wasn't that sentimental. One day I was driving to a Western friend's home, and I pull up at signal, and I just look at my Twitter, and at that time, one of the very popular Indian authors, Said Naqvi, his daughter was actually pleading on Twitter for oxygen for her father, and I knew Naqvi Saab. So I got sentimental, and I kind of cried a bit. But then the signal opened, and I went to that friend's home, and there he spotted that my eyes are a bit red. So he asked me what exactly is going on. I told him this is how things are. And that friend actually, because he was friend, he very frankly actually said something that still breaks my heart. He says that no matter how much sentimental you are for an Indian, you might consider Hindus, Indian Sikhs, Indian Christians, and Indian Muslims your brothers, but to them you will always be one thing, and that is enemy, right? This thing did not sink in at that time. I was in denial. So when this Jafar Express incident took place, the kind of savage pleasure that every Indian seemed to be taking actually brought it home that this is how things are, and it is really saddening, because in the end, who are we? We are all human beings. Regarding this talk today, when I was coming here, Sana, I was reminded, and somehow the General MacArthur's prayer for his son was actually playing in my head, and at that time this quote actually came to my head: "Build me a son whose wishes will not take the place of deeds." And this is the tragedy, Sana. Our army, armed forces, our law enforcement agencies are doing an incredible job, no doubt about that. But what are we doing repeatedly? It doesn't seem a vicious cycle. Every other day there is an incident, you and I speak, and we talk about more or less the same things, same issues: how to do it, why to do it, when to do it, where to go, what exactly can be done. By this time, we have mapped out all the challenges this country faces, right? In diplomacy, because India is far bigger than you are. In India's ability to infiltrate Pakistani minds and somehow hack them. In India's ability to actually keep on supporting these elements, also work on divisions within society too. But when you talk about heroes, what are heroes made of? They are given challenges. They are given, in Greek mythology, they were given trials, and they had to actually surmount them. Are we surmounting these? Have we developed a coherent plan, Sana? If that is so, why is it that the same tragedies keep on repeating themselves again and again with more and more intensity? Where is the National Action Plan 3.0? Because we need it now, right? Where is the kind of leadership that was needed? When social media comes, where are those voices that can actually just appear and dismiss every fake news or fake item that might be there? This is our tragedy. We understand what is wrong and how to fix it. But the problem is that the right kind of people lack conviction, and that's why we are attacked and divided and attacked again. And yet the monsters who are attacking us, because they have the conviction, Sana, because on the other side, the people who are actually sponsoring them are so full of hate that they can't actually see forest for trees. This will continue to happen. Now you can actually talk about the possibility of how to actually plead with the international community. But first, who is going to plead with my own leaders who seem to not be able to actually take the kind of initiative that is needed every day to come on television and build consensus every day? I mean, look at Donald Trump in America, whether you like him or not. The guy actually gave the world a master class on how to communicate. They kept on, blocking him from platforms. But he had established a link with his own supporter base. And he never lost touch of that. Unfortunately, when it comes to our national, strategy, it seems to be reactive, not proactive. Until the time you are not going to find all these terrorists and, just squish them, until the time you don't break this linkage of the sponsors, the handlers, and the terrorists, we will continue to have this conversation. And we will keep on saying it is act of war, that is 9/11, this is something else. Nothing else will happen.
Right. Janjua Sahab, I want your perspective on that too, because when we talk about sponsors or handlers or people that have been involved in these terrorist activities, there is, of course, also there are people or elements at home that have also harmed the interests of the country. And that also includes, of course, political elements that have been part of certain decisions that have also resulted in where we are standing today, something also mentioned in the press conference earlier. And so I want your take in terms of when we talk about action that needs to be taken, of course, with regards to India and Afghanistan. What about action that needs to be taken at home in terms of those responsible or those that are part of harming the interests of the country, those that go on social media and run a campaign against the country? This is, of course, something that has been going on for quite some time now, but without consequence.
You see, the Chief Minister himself has very clearly articulated in the press conference today that the dual approach or the ambivalence in the state policy needs to give way to a unanimity and clarity of purpose. I think it sums up our dilemma. As W.B. Yeats has said that the things fall apart, the center cannot hold, and the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, and the worst are full of passionate intensity. You see, we are quite ambivalent and confused. We still keep confusing kinetic and non-kinetic components of this counter-terrorism strategy. Governance, politics, and the terrorism are mixed up. We need to be very clear, and we don't have any choice now. Neither we have the luxury of time. I think this is crossing of the Rubicon, and this is our APS moment when the entire nation should wake up and get serious to confront this scourge. I think the solution and the template are there, the capability is there, only the will is required. And I'm sure the clarion call has been given in the Chief Minister's presser, and the clarity with which the civil and military elements have articulated their resolve to confront this menace. I'm sure the devil lies in the detail while they execute this thing, but there is no choice but to execute both the components hand in glove. Both have to proceed with equal intensity. On non-kinetic front, we need to do a better job of engaging with the politically estranged. We need to ensure that the fruits of governance are equitably sent and disseminated. And we have to ensure that the frustrated young generation is integrated better. They are given the requisite reasons to get integrated with the state and society. And we have to ensure that in the remote fastnesses of Balochistan's difficult terrain, the writ of the state is extended by way of infrastructural and digital connectivity. And even if we have to spend more, we should spend more. It was very heartening to note today that rupees 210 billion, which was the development budget of Balochistan, for the first time it's going to be spent 100%. Earlier on, it was not even spent for lack of capacity and expertise. So those are the things that we need to do. We need to abolish the B areas, and we need to invest in our policing. And we need to invest in counter-terrorism departments of police. We need to invest in judiciary. The National Action Plan 2.0, which was unveiled in 2021, has 14 points now. And if you very carefully consider point 5 and 6, it all pertains to regulation of social media, to uh, modification of criminal justice system. The last point is the modification of criminal justice system, whether it has been done. Today it was revealed that the conviction rate of terrorism related cases in Balochistan is 0.5%. That is abysmally low. How could you fight terrorism once you cannot prosecute a terrorist? So all these non-kinetic components have to move: governance, administration, policing, and better engagement, and then elimination of all kinds of corruption in governance, because this is something that results in frustration of the masses. Uh, Having done that, we need to move very swiftly on this kinetic front. Uh, we need to map out, and I believe already their bases are mapped out, but we need to now go and squeeze those spaces. And even if those bases are linked to safe sanctuaries across the border in Afghanistan, we need to go and take out those sanctuaries, because this is a clear and present danger to our national security. And we need to highlight, as Faisal was mentioning, that we should highlight this collusion of India in this in these acts of terrorism uh, at the global stage. Whether it gets a sensitive hearing at international forums because of India's strategic relevance in contained China policy is another matter. But we should do our part and expose India's naked terrorist propensity and the ferocity with which they are supporting this insurgency, and the glee that they took on social media, and the way act of terror was being projected and as a failure of complete security and governance apparatus, and it was linked to things that were completely political. So all those things in which they take vicarious pleasure in acts of terror in Pakistan need to be exposed at global fora. So these are the kinetic and non-kinetic components we need to look at. And the social media, yes, it's a very important tool at the hands of both the terrorists and the saboteurs. We need to do a better job of monitoring, surveilling through technological means, as well as presenting a strong rebuttal. And we should try and wean off our young generation, because a complete new phase of sociological change is emerging in Balochistan. There's a new generation which is better educated, which is aware of the world. When it sees, it gets more frustrated, and its frustration is then capitalized upon by these elements, which wean them off from a patriotic narrative and induce them into those acts with which they could blackmail them. That is how you can see women also being recruited to the cause as suicide bombers. So we have to have a multi-vector, multi-pronged approach. And as a nation, must have clarity of purpose and will to
Right.
go and fight at all fronts.
Right. Thank you very much, Brigadier Janjua, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Farrukh, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, but regarding this idea that Pakistan needs to actually bring this information to the world community, the biggest problem is that this delusion is actually based on one thing, that the world is based on any kind of justice, right? International system is not based on that, and you will be surprised what kind of inhuman or brutal activities can be normalized. Do you want an example? I give you two.
Okay.
One is Israel's activity in Gaza. The other one is whatever is happening in Africa, right? Particularly in Sudan. People don't even mention Sudan because it is normalized. That will not do. The fact is that it will always be, advocacy will be a function of your national power. And if you want to do something, do one thing, please, and be smart about it. Farrukh Pitafi might actually keep on boasting about his high IQ, but individually he is nothing. As a collective, as a nation, we can bring together many minds. And remember, every doctrination is an argument, Sana. All you have to do is fight it with a better argument. And this is one thing I've been pleading everyone with, but people don't listen. And finally, the concern about intelligence sharing that I keep on mentioning, that the National Election Plan Part 1, Internal National Security Policy, National Election Plan 2, everything actually revolved around this idea that all intelligence organs will share information. And remember that in every thana, in every kachari, even health department has some incredible data. We don't share that. We have not tried to actually revive that model, although twice or thrice we have tried it, but then we have given it up. Because of that, you keep on laboring in darkness, and that will not do, Sana. I promise you, if we are going to continue to speak like this and nothing happens, 1 year later, 2 years later, hell, 20 years later, we will be talking about the same things.
Right. Faisal, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just wanted to obviously, agree with Farrukh when he says that, of course, there are double standards from the world, of course, from the Western world, I must say, because when it is East Timor, when it is South Sudan, of course, they have their own preferences. But when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to Palestine, they are, on the side of inhumanity. But in the same, phrase, I would say that at the same time, all of these dossiers and highlighting the actual problem and highlighting how India is, of course, being, an abettor, a facilitator, a financier of terrorism in this region. I think this must be carried on highlighting. Reason being, if there is a reciprocation in the future, of course, we know that India is going to highlight against Pakistan. So before India highlights that phase, of course, we have to highlight this, because this is based on the realities, based on the truth. And this is some reality that Americans, they already know. I mean, I remember I actually watched one of the interviews of CIA's former director, where she was completely, claiming that Indians are the ones who are facilitating terrorism in Pakistan. Indians are the ones who are financing terrorism within Pakistan. So if they already know, if the evidence is already there from their own, mouth or interlocutors, then why not we give the evidence? Why not on the basis of reality, we can show the world that this is India that happens to be a terror exporter, and it is not only exporting terrorism to the Western countries, but of course it is financing and facilitating and abetting terrorism within Pakistan.
Right.
And just one sentence, do whatever you want to. We have been arguing for this for quite some time. Why not do it? Why always keep on talking? Deeds, wishes. Wishes meet deeds. Please ask deeds to take lead.
Right. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate. As always, that's all that we have time for. We'll now see you tomorrow.